Even though motion and quiescence, external activity, and inner contemplation may be interconnected so that they gain importance and significance only through each other, we nevertheless consider one of this pair of opposites, quiescence, substance, the inner stability of our life's content, as the essentially valuable and definitive in contrast with what is changing, restless, external. Consequently, the goal of our thoughts is to find what is steadfast and reliable behind ephemeral appearances and the flux of events, and to advance from mutual dependence to self-sufficiency and independence. In this way, we attain the fixed points that can guide us through the maze of phenomena, and that represent the counterpart of what we conceive in ourselves as valuable and definitive. To begin with an obvious example of this tendency, light is regarded as a fine substance emanating from bodies, heat as a substance, physical life as the activity of material living spirits, psychological processes as being supported by a specific substance of the soul. The mythologies that posit a thunderer. Behind the thunder, a solid substructure below the earth to keep it from falling, or spirits in the stars to conduct them in their celestial course. All these are searching for a substance, not only as the embodiment of the perceived qualities and motions, but as the initial active force. An absolute is sought beyond the mere relationships between objects, beyond their accidental and temporal existence. Early modes of thought are unable to reconcile themselves to change, to the coming and going of all terrestrial forms of physical and mental life. Every kind of living creature represents to them a unique act of creation. Institutions, forms of living, valuations have existed eternally and absolutely as they exist today. The phenomena of the world have validity not only for man and his organized life, but are in themselves as we perceive them. In short, the first tendency of thought, by which we seek to direct the disorderly flow of impressions into a regular channel and to discover a fixed structure amidst their fluctuations, is focused upon the substance and the absolute, in contrast with which all particular happenings and relations are relegated to a preliminary stage which the understanding has to transcend. The epistemology of a relativistic worldview. The examples given indicate that this trend has been reversed. Whereas almost all cultures originally took such an approach, the basic tendency of modern science is no longer to comprehend phenomena through or as specific substances, but as motions, the bearers of which are increasingly divested of any specific qualities, and it expresses the qualities of things in quantitative, i.e. relative, terms. Science posits, instead of the absolute stability of organic, psychic, ethical, and social forms, a ceaseless development in which each element has a restricted place determined by the relationship to its own past and future. It has abandoned the search for the essence of things, and is reconciled to stating the relationships that exist between objects and the human mind from the viewpoint of the human mind. That the apparent stability of the earth is not only a complicated movement, but that its position in the universe is established by a mutual relationship to other masses of matter, is a very simple but striking case of the transition from the stability and absoluteness of the world's contents to their dissolution into motions and relations. But all this, even if carried to its conclusion, would still allow, or even require, a fixed point, an absolute truth. Cognition itself, which accomplishes that dissolution, seems to elude the flux of eternal change and the merely relative determination of its content. The dissolution of the absolute objectivity of what is cognized into modes of apprehension that are valid only for the human mind, presupposes an ultimate point somewhere that cannot be derived from anything else. The flux and the relativity of psychic processes cannot affect those presuppositions and norms according to which we decide whether our cognitions have this or that character. The merely psychological derivation, to which all absolutely objective knowledge is supposed to be reduced, depends nevertheless upon certain axioms which cannot have a merely psychological significance if we are to avoid moving in a vicious circle. This is not only a point of the greatest importance for the general view of things on which the following discussion is based, but also provides a model for many particular aspects, and it deserves closer scrutiny. There is no doubt that the truth of any statement can be known only on the basis of criteria that are completely certain and general. Such criteria may be limited to specific areas and may be legitimated by higher level criteria, in such fashion that a hierarchical series of cognitions is constructed, the validity of each one depending upon the preceding one. However, if this series is not to be suspended in the air, and indeed, for it to be possible at all, it must have somewhere an ultimate basis, a supreme authority, which provides legitimation to other members of the series without needing legitimation itself. This is the scheme into which our empirical knowledge has to be integrated, and which relates all limited and relative knowledge to knowledge that is no longer conditional. Yet we shall never know what this absolute knowledge is. Its real content can never be established with the same certainty as can its general, so to say, formal existence, because the process of incorporation within a higher-level principle, the attempt to find an antecedent for what appeared to be the ultimate principle, is endless. No matter what proposition we have discovered as the ultimate one, standing above the relativity of all other propositions, it remains possible that we shall recognize this one too as being merely relative and conditioned by a superior one. This possibility is a positive challenge, which the history of thought has illustrated many times. Somewhere knowledge may have an absolute basis, but we can never state irrevocably where this basis is. Consequently, in order to avoid dogmatic thought, we have to treat each position at which we arrive as if it were the penultimate one. The sum of knowledge does not thereby become tainted with skepticism. It is just as great a mistake to confuse relativism with skepticism as it was to accuse Kant of skepticism because he treated time and space as conditions of our experience. Both standpoints lend themselves to such a judgment if their opposite is accepted outright as the absolutely correct picture of reality, so that every theory that negates this then appears as a perturbation of reality. If the concept of relativity is constructed in such a way that it requires an absolute, it is impossible to eliminate the absolute without self-contradiction. However, the course of our investigation will show that an absolute is not required as a conceptual counterpart to the relativity of things. Such a postulate involves a transfer from the sphere of empirical circumstances, where, indeed, a relation between elements which stand outside any such a relation and in that sense are absolute, to a sphere that concerns the basis of all empiricism. If we admit that our knowledge may have somewhere an absolute norm, a supreme authority that is self-justifying, but that its content remains in constant flux, because knowledge progresses and every content attained suggests another which would be more profound and more appropriate for the task, this is not skepticism, any more than it is skepticism when we admit, as is generally done, that while natural phenomena are subject to universal laws, these laws have to be corrected continually as our knowledge increases, that their content is always historically conditioned, and that they lack the absolute character that the concept implies. Equally, the ultimate presuppositions of perfected knowledge cannot be regarded as merely conditioned, and only subjectively or relatively true, but every single presupposition that is available at any particular moment should and must be so regarded.